A while back, I converted an Atari 130XE into a laptop, but my printer was not large enough at the time to print it in as one full width piece, and I had a seam down the middle. So I've done some modifications to it, and in this video I'm going to show you the process of building this laptop. I start out with an original 130XE motherboard, and then I remove the GTIA chip and socket, put a socket in. I remove the ROM chip, put a socket in. And I remove the MMU chip and put a socket in. And then if I'm going to put a Pokey Max 4 in, I also remove the Pokey chip and put a socket in there. Then I remove the RF modulator, the video connector, the power connector, and the power switch. After those components are removed and the chips are socketed, I start on the modifications to the board. The first thing I do is hardwire in a cable from the SIO port with a connector and mount the FujiNet onto the board. Then I install the Sophia 2 video board with a micro SD card connector. So I have a custom made board that converts the TE connector to a micro SD connector for the LCD panel. Then I install the Ultimate 1 megabyte. I install the power management board with the attached voltage regulator board, and that board converts the 11.1 volt power from the battery pack down to 5 volts for the logic board, the audio board, and the LCD panel. I then install the battery level indicator and the stereo audio amplifier and a Pokey Max 4 if I'm going to add that or not. Sometimes I don't put that in. But on this PAL board, I wanted stereo, so I did put one in that board. I then install the keyboard mounting bracket and the mounting bracket for the battery. I designed the case in Fusion 360, and I'll show you the breakdown of all the components. So here's a image of the main original motherboard. So the original board has all these existing holes, so I took advantage of those as much as possible. So the first thing we do is mount these keyboard brackets onto the board. And the pegs here are where the keyboard sits down on. So you screw those brackets in. Then we have this bracket, and it holds the audio board, the voltage regulator board, and the power management board. And then this bracket here is where the Ultimate 1 megabyte mounts, screws in. Everywhere you see a large hole there is where the threaded inserts go in. Use a soldering iron to push them in. Then there's a power bracket. So after you pull off of the board, after you pull the RF modulator out and the power connector and the video connectors, you mount this bracket, and that is what holds the reset button, power button, audio jack, and charging jack. So those mount on there. There's the two buttons. Those are 3D printed as well. This is the battery mounting bracket, and it also holds the HDMI connector right there. Here's where the light pipes feed through. Yeah, so this just bolts down in the existing holes of the board from the bottom. Then you drop the battery in here. Then the cover goes over the top like that. And then we have the Fuji mount light pipe mounting bracket here. This slips over the top of the Fuji net, and then these caps go underneath, and then the fiber optic light pipes feed in there. And then there's the Fuji net mounting bracket. So the switch screws in here. This button slips over the push button and sticks out the side of the case right there. This part slides onto the motherboard right there. Oh, that's the FujiNet board. It slides in there. And then this up here is for the top of this is for the keyboard rests on top of it right there. And it holds the keyboard flat. And that cutout there is for the keyboard screw to miss, so it doesn't hit it. So this helps level the keyboard. FujiNet slips in there. This slides onto the motherboard and then bolts onto the motherboard through the bottom in an existing hole on the motherboard. And that's the FujiNet mount. And the FujiNet has holes on it already that drop in there and hold it in place. And then there's the case bottom. And so that's how that sits. All these indicator lights are fiber optic cables that fish through. So they feed through here and then go through these holes on the bracket and feed around. So that's how that works. And then, let's see here. Next would be the lid. So this is the earlier version where there was only one tension hinge and all the power and video cables fished through this side. Then the buttons go in there, and there's a button bracket that mounts on there. And you can see the underside here. This bracket mount screws in, and there's a circuit board there for the button bar that mounts in there. In the version 2 design, see this piece here would slide in, hinge shaft, that part. See, that would, after you'd fish your cables in, you would push, after you fed the cables in, then you'd slide this in that would add a mounting shaft for the display to slide onto and make it smaller radius inside. So you can't fish the cables in you need the biggest opening first to feed the cables through, and then you put that in. But this is all gone now in the new design. And now there's two of these, and they bolt on, so you can remove them and adjust them. They're no longer molded into the case. And when the display is on, you can see here that this whole centerpiece is on the display itself. So there's an opening there. So this was kind of nice looking because it was hiding where the cables would go. But they went here. But the problem with this design was that all the force was over here on this side, and it just made the hinge weak. So now when we switch over to the other design, you'll see that I've changed that. So now this is part of the case part, and the lid only has these two pieces here, and now we have these tension hinges. We've got the little tongs on each end that the hinges will grip onto. This side just has that inset on it, and this side is hollowed out, and then it's cut out so that the cable feeds through for the LCD through this way. It'll drop straight in, so the hinges will be detached when you drop it in. So you'll drop the display straight on here, and it's clear right there, so it just slides straight down. Okay, then you'll take a hinge and bolt that on after you install into the hinge. You'll install the nuts, the bolt. Let's see here, where's the bolt? Let's turn all these on. Okay. And shaft mounts. There, so you'll have your washer there, the metal one that goes into those tongs there. So if I disabled the lid for now, it'll go like that. And if I turn off this display, there you go. So then there's our tight tension hinge, or this thing's hard to turn. And then the display tongs go into those hinges, into those guys like that. That's how that works. So then once you drop the display in and bolt both hinges onto the lid, this will still be wonky in the center here. So we need some shafts to go in and hold that in place after you've fed your cable through. The way that works is we've got these hinge mounts here, shaft mounts. And you'll take these and push them in this way, and then screw them on each end, and that secures the display onto the lid. We can do a cross section here. Section analysis. And see up close how all that works. Cable feeds in through here. Put the case bottom back on. That's everything right there. The speakers have little clips on them, and they just snap into place. Magnets mount here in the corners. That's what holds the display shut. Once everything is assembled, put together, there's zero room left. There's just the smallest amount of gap, because the goal was to try to get this to be the same height and dimensions, width and depth, as a stock 130XE. So this is the same height as the back end of a 130XE, but the 130XE slopes downward, so the front is still taller, but when the lid is up, this is almost the same. We can do a section analysis again on this side to see how tight it is. So you can see the lid. Display just leaves just enough gap for the keyboard so it doesn't touch the LCD panel. And the Ultimate 1 megabyte, when installed, so here's the bracket for the speaker, so it comes down, so there's just enough room to where the Ultimate 1 megabyte doesn't run into the speaker. So it took a while to get everything as close as possible. Here's the snap for the how the lid snaps together. You can see that here. There it is right there, the notch. And that goes all the way around. And the same as the display up here. It snaps together. I print with 4 filaments, an interface filament between the support material and the part, so that they separate easier, and then the gray, the dark gray, and the blue. And then I print at 0.08 resolution, so each part takes about a day and a half. So in total, the whole thing takes about 4 to 5 days to print. These are volume up and down. FujiNet reset. These are all 3. This is reset, FujiNet reset, long soft reset, and switch discs. So I'll power on. Okay, we have our status. We're down 2 levels left. So that's each one's about an hour, with a spare reserve hour after all lights go out. So there's about 3 hours left. It's on Wi-Fi. FujiNet came up. And can load a demo. Says stereo version. That's because there's a Pokémax 2 inside. Pokémax 4. So we have 2 speakers here. It's really strong now, like a real laptop. 3D printed in color. Same with the back. It's pretty loud. reset it, you can just reach back and push the reset button. Okay, now it's gonna load the ultimate 1 megabyte. If I hold reset down and help, we can come in there. So we've got the 1 meg of RAM there. High-speed I/O. The resolution of the monitor is 1920 by 1080, so it's in 1344 by 960 right now. Here's the dual pokies. The video is controlled by a Sophia 2 and a Sophia 3, whichever. The 3 just came out. So that's the replacement GTIA inside. Here's the bottom. It has a slight bump texture. The label is modeled after the original 130XE label, except the serial number is the date that I made this one. Even though this one's revised now, I used the same old label from the original version. These capped plugs here are for the optional, you could optionally screw the lid on, but it's so, the snap together works so well, I just don't even bother doing that. But if it were to loosen up over time or something, you can add screws. You just have to put the threaded inserts into the lid of the case so it could bolt together. Back of the hinges slightly protrude up. That's one to when it's up, so you can't see through it. Makes it nice and tight in there. But the main reason is so that those stop the hinge from coming back too far. So that's the maximum tilt. And that does it for this video. Thanks for watching.